The 1930s battle for the last free Apache. Full story. The scent hits them first. The metallic tang of fresh blood mixing with mountain pine. Then comes the silence, no birds singing, no insects chirping, as if nature itself is holding its breath. In Mexico's Sierra Madre Mountains, silence like this can mean only one thing. The Bronco Apache have struck again. But this October morning in 1927 isn't just another raid, it's the beginning of a war that will bring an end to Native America's last free warriors. Ready to explore more untold stories of Native American history? Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories and join us every week as we uncover forgotten chapters of America's past. Hit that notification bell to never miss an episode. Hooves pound against rocky ground as a group of Mexican ranchers race their horses through dense pine forest, following a trail still fresh enough that broken twigs haven't yet begun to brown. Their leader, Francisco Fimbres, leans low over his horse's pushing the animal to its limits. Each passing moment could mean the difference between life and death. The group rounds a bend in the trail and pulls up short. The scene before them strikes like a physical blow. In a shallow ravine beside the path lies a woman's body, positioned with deliberate care, a final mockery from her killers. Maria Fimbres' dress, once a cheerful blue cotton, now displays a gruesome palette of death. Knife wounds cover her torso, each cut placed with the precision of a surgeon and the cruelty of a torturer. Shallow slices across her arms show defensive wounds. She fought hard against her attackers. Deeper stab wounds cluster around her vital organs. The killing blows, delivered only after she had been made to suffer. Her throat bears the signature mark of an Apache warrior knife, the skin parted as cleanly as if done with a surgeon's scalpel. Her fingers are broken and twisted, testament to her desperate final struggle. Francisco practically falls from his horse in his rush to reach his wife's side. His calloused hands shake as they hover over her body, afraid to touch, afraid to make this nightmare real. A sound escapes his throat, not words, not quite a scream, but something primal that makes the other ranchers turn away in discomfort. They've seen death before, but not like this, not so personal, not so cruel. Grief gives way to rising panic as Francisco's eyes dart around the scene. His 3-year-old son, Geraldo, had been riding with Maria. The story is written in the mud around the ravine. Small boot prints lead away from Maria's body, accompanied by the distinctive marks of Apache moccasins. They've taken his boy. Deep in Mexico's Sierra Madre Occidental Mountains, approximately 100 Apaches still lived free in the 1920s, decades after their supposed defeat. The locals called them Bronco Apache, the untamed ones. These weren't ordinary survivors. They were the elite warriors who had outmaneuvered Spanish cavalry and Comanche raiders through the 1700s, who had escaped Mexican bounty hunters, paid to collect Apache scalps throughout the 1800s. Men, women, children, it didn't matter to the hunters. Every Apache scalp brought payment. The Bronco Apache moved like ghosts through the mountains, masters of an unforgiving terrain that had defeated countless pursuing armies. They could disappear into thin air, using techniques passed down through generations. Their raids were precisely planned and executed with surgical efficiency. Cattle would vanish from herds without a single broken fence or gate. Supplies would disappear from locked storehouses without any sign of forced entry. Parents warned their children with stories that were more truth than legend. Never wander far from home. Never play in the forest alone. The Apache were known to take young ones when opportunity rose, raising them as their own to preserve their dwindling numbers. In the dark hours, strange animal calls would pierce the night, calls that made experienced woodsmen freeze in their tracks. A coyote's howl that held too many syllables, a bird song that came hours after sunset. These were the Apache's secret language, signals passed between hidden scouts, watching from the shadows. They were always there, always watching, choosing their moments with predatory patience. Most ranchers accepted these raids as an inevitable cost of frontier life. Lose a few cattle, but never follow the Apache into their mountain domain. Those who did usually vanished forever. The Apache knew every hidden cave, every secret trail through the treacherous peaks. They could circle behind pursuit parties, becoming the hunters instead of the hunted. More than one posse had returned with fewer men than they'd started with. if they returned at all. But as Francisco kneels beside his wife's mutilated body that blood-soaked October morning, something fundamental changes in the world. From that moment forward, his life would revolve around two singular purposes: finding his son Geraldo and methodically eliminating every last Bronco Apache. In the Sierra Madre, this wasn't mere revenge anymore. This was about extinction. Prior to Francisco Fimbres' discovery of his murdered wife and missing son, a seemingly ordinary morning had set events in motion that would change the course of Apache history. The Fimbres family had left their home in Nacorichico, Sonora, for what should have been a routine journey. They traveled as they always did, two horses carrying for souls, through the mountain passes they had traversed countless times before. The family maintained a careful formation on the narrow trail Francisco rode at the rear, his young daughter secure in his arms as their horse picked its way along the rocky path. 30 yards ahead, Maria guided their second mount. 3-year-old Geraldo held close as they wound through the Sierra Madre foothills. The familiar landmarks passed by one, until they approached a massive boulder that marked a sharp turn in the trail. What happened next would be riddled into distinct versions, each carrying its own weight of terror. The first account described a sudden rifle shot, shattering the mountain silence. In this telling, Maria pitched forward from her saddle, somehow managing to wrap herself around Geraldo, even as she fell. Apache warriors then emerged from behind the boulder, weapons ready as they closed in on mother and child. The second version painted a scene of silent horror. No gunshot warned of the attack. Instead, 2 or 3 Apache women, accompanied by a man whose name would soon become infamous, seemed to materialize from the very rocks themselves. Their hands seized Maria and Geraldo, dragging them from the horse before either could cry out. The silence of this version carried its own special terror, the reality that death could come without warning in these mountains. Both accounts converged as the Apache surrounded Maria with drawn knives. Francisco's hand moved to his weapon, whether revolver or rifle. Accounts differ, but most agree he was armed. Time seemed to stretch and distort as he faced an impossible choice. His daughter's arms tightened around his waist, her body beginning to shake with fear. 30 yards of exposed trail separated him from his wife and son, an impossible distance to cross without ensuring death for all 3 of them. The weight of his decision would haunt Francisco forever. His daughter's presence forced him to confront a brutal calculation: attempt a rescue that would likely end in all their deaths, or retreat to save at least one child. Her frightened whimper broke through his indecision. Francisco turned his horse, each of her sobs piercing his heart as they fled down the trail. Half a mile from the ambush site, Francisco found a dense thicket. With trembling hands, he lifted his daughter from the saddle and concealed her in the brush. His promise to return quickly felt hollow even as he spoke it. Then he spurred his horse toward Nacorichico, knowing that every passing moment could mean the difference between life and death for his wife and son. When the rescue party returned to the ambush site, they found only Maria's body where she had fallen. Geraldo had vanished into the mountains with his captors. As Francisco prepared for immediate pursuit, an unexpected voice emerged from his grief-stricken haze. Lupe, herself a former captive who had been adopted into Nacorichico as a teenager, approached with crucial insights about the raiders. Her intimate knowledge of Apache ways led her to a chilling conclusion: any rescue attempt would be doomed before it began. The warriors' mastery of the mountain terrain meant they would spot pursuers long before any rescue could be attempted. Francisco's attempt to recruit Lupe as a guide revealed the depth of trauma she still carried. She refused with visible terror, the mere thought of encountering her former people again clearly triggering deep-seated fears. Her last experience with the Apache had left wounds that time had not healed. Through her fear, Lupe shared critical information about the raiders' leader. She identified him as Apache Juan, a man she described with a mixture of dread and loathing. According to her account, he had been present during Maria's murder, though she didn't elaborate on his specific role. Her description of him as bad and cruel seemed weighted with personal experience. Lupe's proposed strategy struck at the heart of Francisco's paternal instincts. She advised complete inaction, no pursuit, no rescue attempts, no retaliation. Her experience with the Apache led her to believe they would kill Gerardo at the first sign of pursuit, simply to discourage further tracking. This wasn't an idle threat. She had witnessed similar decisions before. However, if the Apache believed themselves safe from retaliation, Luke suggested a different fate awaited Gerardo. They would likely adopt him into their tribe, as they had done with dozens of captives through the years. These adopted children often became fully integrated members of the community, their original identities gradually fading as they absorbed Apache culture and ways. The suggestion to wait years before attempting a rescue, to allow the Apache time to grow attached to Geraldo, was more than Francisco could bear. A father's instinct to protect his child overwhelmed any strategic consideration. Already haunted by guilt from his retreat during the attack, he found himself incapable of further patience. Through the next 3 years, Francisco organized 8 methodical expeditions into the Sierra Madre Mountains. Each venture penetrated deeper into Apache territory, but as Luke had forewarned, they discovered only traces of their quarry. They would find camps with embers still glowing, suggesting the Apache had fled mere hours before their arrival. Trails would appear promising before vanishing into the rugged landscape. With each failed attempt, Francisco refined his approach. His men adopted dark clothing to merge with the mountain shadows and maintain strict silence during their movements. They forsook fires, consuming cold rations to avoid telltale smoke. They studied Apache tracking techniques, learning to detect the subtle signs of passage that ordinary observers would overlook. Yet the Bronco Apache remained perpetually beyond their grasp. Such elusiveness came as no revelation to those versed in Apache warfare. During their 1800s campaigns, U.S. military leaders had discovered that only Apache scouts could effectively track other Apache. They had enlisted hundreds of native trackers, recognizing that locating the Bronco in their mountain domain demanded profound understanding of their methods. As Francisco pursued his relentless search, an American scholar named Grenville Goodwin began documenting the last free Apache. His research, though somewhat idealized, offered crucial insights into how these warriors had endured decades of persecution. He monitored all newspaper references to Apache activity and collected testimonies from contacts at reservations like San Carlos. Goodwin mounted to expeditions into Mexico himself, hoping to encounter the mysterious Bronco. Like countless others, he returned empty-handed. The observations preserved in Goodwin's journals, later published as the Apache Diaries by his son, painted a detailed picture of survival. The Bronco Apache maintained their independence through an intricate blend of resourcefulness and strategic thinking while skilled at hunting and foraging. Their mobility-focused lifestyle necessitated supplementing their resources through periodic raids. These raids reflected their tactical sophistication. They would take minimal livestock from multiple locations rather than repeatedly targeting single ranches, distributing their impact across the region. The Apache's reputation for ruthless reprisal convinced most farmers to accept minor losses rather than risk escalation. The Bronco's survival extended beyond raiding. Warriors occasionally visited the San Carlos and Mescalero reservations, where aging family members provided supplies and news. These connections, confirmed through multiple witness accounts, indicated sustained contact between the free Apache and their reservation-dwelling relatives. Perhaps most remarkably, the Bronco Apache sometimes moved openly through Mexican settlements. Many had learned sufficient Spanish for basic commerce. Reports mention finding Apache camps containing Mexican attire, indicating their ability to blend into local communities when necessary. Their mixed ancestry, many being of both Apache and Mexican descent, facilitated this integration. This capacity to shift between worlds, to appear and vanish at will, made the Bronco Apache virtually untraceable. They moved fluidly between roles as warriors and traders as circumstances demanded. Their profound knowledge of the Sierra Madre's vast wilderness offered countless hideouts, while their grasp of Mexican society enabled them to gather intelligence and provisions when needed. For Francisco, this adaptability turned his search into an exercise in frustration. Each promising lead dissolved. Every trail went cold. All potential contacts proved unreliable. Yet each setback only hardened his determination. The Apache's very elusiveness, their ability to vanish like morning mist, served as a constant reminder that somewhere in those mountains, his son might still be breathing. As 1930 dawned, Francisco's tireless search for his son had begun attracting wider attention. While Mexican authorities maintained official distance from his efforts, word spread northward. Across the border, the Douglas Daily Dispatch transformed his personal quest into a public cause, drawing volunteers from throughout the United States, who viewed this as an opportunity to participate in what was being marketed as the final Apache hunt. The surge of American interest soon eclipsed Mexican involvement, but this influx of foreign support triggered concerns. In Mexico City, government officials watched with growing unease as armed American civilians prepared to operate within their borders, particularly since many volunteers openly discussed their interest in exploring rumors of mineral wealth, gold, silver, and copper deposits supposedly hidden within the Sierra Madre range. Mexican authorities intervened before the American volunteers could mobilize, officially shutting down the operation. While they cited concerns about national sovereignty, underlying worries about foreign prospectors using a rescue mission as cover for mining exploration heavily influenced their decision. Undeterred by official opposition, Francisco pressed forward with his plans. In April 1930, after the government blocked the American volunteer force, he gathered 12 men from Nacarichico, who shared his determination. Following reports of Apache activity between their town and Casas Grandes, they ventured into unexplored regions of the Sierra Madre. Days into their expedition, a telltale wisp of campfire smoke revealed Apache presence. The group approached with carefully honed stealth, their previous failed searches having taught them the importance of patience and precision. Through the forest cover, they identified two Apache women by the fire, apparently unaware of the approaching threat. The attack unfolded with military precision. Their initial volley struck one woman in the arm, causing her to cry out "Nikai," the Apache term for Mexicans. Her companion called for help, specifically shouting for Apache One. Before they could find shelter, a second burst of gunfire silenced them both permanently. While other Apache warriors retreated into the forest, Apache One, the notorious leader Loop had described, chose to stand his ground. Despite overwhelming odds, he turned to engage Francisco's group, providing covering fire for his people's escape. This noble but fatal decision sealed his fate. Francisco's men pinned him in position, while others maneuvered around his flank. A well-placed shot wounded him before the group closed in to complete their task. In the aftermath, Francisco's party searched the deserted camp, claiming saddles, rifles, and various Apache artifacts as trophies. However, they committed to fatal mistakes that would have devastating consequences. They examined the bodies of their victims and then left those bodies exposed and unburied. A calculated insult meant to instill fear in surviving Apache. Francisco believed this demonstration of ruthlessness might finally compel the Apache to surrender. Giraldo. The Arizona Daily Star published what essentially served as a victory photograph, celebrating the elimination of Apache John and his companions. Despite Loop's previous warnings about Apache psychology, Francisco had convinced himself that terror would succeed where persistence had failed. 2 days after the raid, passing Mexican riders detected decay in the air. Investigation revealed that other Apache had returned to properly bury their fallen companions. But beside these carefully prepared graves lay another, crudely dug and shallow from this rough pit. Giraldo's legs protruded from the soil, a deliberate message to his father. The 7-year-old's body showed unmistakable signs of torture, indicating a prolonged death. Francisco's attempt to intimidate through desecration of Apache dead had instead guaranteed his son's execution. Those who knew Francisco said this discovery shattered his essence. The man who had maintained hope through years of searching vanished, replaced by someone consumed solely by thoughts of revenge. The complex emotions that had driven him before, grief for his wife, hope for his son, guilt over his retreat, condensed into pure vengeance. The bitter irony of Francisco's story resided in how his action had ultimately destroyed his objective. By choosing intimidation over patience, by violating Apache burial customs instead of respecting their ways, He had triggered precisely the response Loop had cautioned against. His son, who might have been adopted and eventually rescued alive, instead became another victim in an endless cycle of retribution. This transformation of Francisco's mission, from rescue to revenge, marked a pivotal moment in regional history. Blood feuds had long characterized settler-Apache relations, each violent act spawning new waves of retaliation. But this particular cycle carried unique significance because it originated from Francisco's genuine desire to save his son rather than mere vengeance for his wife. The seeds of this tragedy had been planted years before Geraldo's death. In 1915, 12 years before the attack on the Fimbers family, Francisco had participated in a cattle recovery mission that would unknowingly set these events in motion. During that pursuit, the ranchers captured a young Apache girl, beginning a cycle of retribution that would span generations. This girl, who would later be known as Lupe, lived briefly with the Fimbers family before being adopted by other household in Nakori Chico. Through her years in the settlement, she developed a growing certainty that her capture had marked the town, and particularly the Fimbers family, for revenge. Apache won the feared warrior leader, and her mother kept constant watch on their movements. Several years after her capture, Lupe requested permission to rejoin her people. The community, perhaps hoping to make amends, granted her wish. She journeyed into the mountains and located her family, only to face bitter rejection. Her own people threatened death should she ever return, viewing her as irredeemably tainted by her time among the Mexicans. The full weight of this history emerged after the 1927 attack. Lupe, the same girl who had advised Francisco against pursuing his son, recognized a terrible symmetry in events. She believed the woman who had dragged Maria from her horse was her own mother, executing a calculated exchange. A child for a child. The brutal mathematics of revenge had demanded perfect balance. When Francisco described the Apache women killed in his 1930 raid, Lupe made a devastating realization. She believed them to be her mother and sister. The violence between the Broncos and the Fimbers family had come full circle, spanning nearly 2 decades of escalating bloodshed. By 1930, for researcher Grenville Goodwin estimated, only 30 Bronco Apache remained in the Sierra Madre. He based this calculation on careful observation of cattle raids, measuring the food requirements needed to sustain their population. Though imperfect, his estimate painted a clear picture of a people on the brink of extinction. As he wrote, "They are fighting a losing battle in Mexico, and it seems only a question of time till they will be exterminated." The final years of the conflict became shrouded in confusion and contradicting accounts. Sources from 1933 describe Francisco leading a raid that killed 24 Apache, while similar reports from 1930 mention a much smaller death toll. Both accounts agree on one grim detail: 3 captured children died within a year of their capture. Reports from Tucson in September 1934 mirror accounts from 1935 describing how Francisco's group ambushed Apache warriors as they descended from the mountains after heavy snowfall. These contradictions make it difficult to separate fact from legend, but one detail remains consistent. By 1935, all reports of Apache activity in the region ceased. The question of the Bronco Apache's ultimate fate remained unanswered. In 1937, Norwegian explorer Helge Ingstad mounted an expedition into the Sierra Madre, hoping to locate any survivors. Though his official findings reported no contact, his 2 Apache guides, including Llanosa, a warrior who had surrendered with Geronimo in 1886, told a different story to their reservation contacts. Grenville Goodwin's 1938 visit to the Mescalaros reservation yielded compelling evidence that the Bronco Apache's story hadn't ended to independent witnesses. Described recent encounters with wild Apache visitors who spoke Spanish fluently. These accounts suggested some groups had maintained their independence while developing sophisticated strategies for interacting with the outside world. Subsequent decades brought forward additional testimonies that proved difficult to dismiss. A Colorado woman shared detailed recollections of her parents' life in a hidden settlement west of Chihuahua City. She painted a picture of a close-knit mountain community bound by blood ties, where elders taught children the Apache language well into the 1950s. Her family's eventual departure from their mountain refuge marked the end of one branch of this hidden history. Anthropologist Tom Hinton's 1948 research south of Nakarichiko produced another significant discovery. He documented an account of 4 men in traditional buckskin clothing and moccasins who identified themselves as Cherokee descendants. Their appearance in territory primarily occupied by mountain indicated that some Apache groups had forged alliances with other native communities. While preserving their distinct traditions, these scattered reports suggest to divergent paths for the surviving Apache.